Welcome everybody, this is going to be week 8, and what I'm going over for this video is the Writing Project 3, the synthesis essay. Um, Really what I'm going to do in this video is just kind of outline the differences between the analysis essay and the synthesis essay, because in a way they are actually really quite similar. For the last essay, and you'll have to bear with me as this is the first time I'm using this software, in the last essay, what you did is you had first your intro, and then after that you had your side one. Well, most people did side one, side two, and then some people here had their opinion, and then at the very end they had their conclusion. Now, of course, you didn't have to follow this framework because it's completely up to you how you organize and structure your essay. And some people may have actually gotten away with not having their opinion in that fourth section, instead um, just having this being section 1 and being a couple paragraphs, and then having this being section 2 and being a couple paragraphs, and then some people made their opinion present, maybe in their conclusion, or maybe not at all. So for this was for the analysis essay, but now what we're doing is actually the synthesis essay. Now the synthesis essay is really quite similar. Of course, you're going to have the intro, and in that intro you're of course going to have the thesis. Oops. And that'll guide the entire structure of the essay, of course. But now in the second part, you're really going to have an analysis section. And what that is you're now summarizing this entire essay into a single section. Because after you do that, you're analyzing it and you're providing what I call a literature review. And a literature review is where you basically outline all of the main points from all of the literature that's out there. When I say literature, I'm talking about all the current research, all the current websites, all the current information like that. So whenever you're doing the literature review, you're basically giving everyone a snapshot and a summary of what's been happening in your field in the last 5 years. And that's more or less what the literature review is. Now, this analysis is actually, you are explaining what you've already come across in the analysis essay, kind of summarizing it. And then in part 3, you're now going to go over and start synthesizing all of the information that you've already talked about here. This provides an outline of what you covered in your last essay. This emphasizes the main points that the reader should remember. And this is typically going to kind of revolve around the problem, because the problem is really where you're going with this essay. What is the problem, and then how are you going to fix it? Because that is section 4, the solution. What is your solution to the given problem that you've been outlining, you've been analyzing, you've been synthesizing? Now you're going to provide a solution, something new, viable, something that could actually work for your problem. So, and then of course after that we have the conclusion. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about whenever we do an essay like this. Let's see here. Let's say that our topic is, too much technology. Maybe it's too much technology in the classroom. Too much tech in the classroom. So, of course, before I even begin my introduction, I'm going to need to come up with a research question. And that question needs to be a question that's going to be answered by your essay. So, for instance, my question might be something like, is social media an effective means of presenting course material. And so what I mean by that is, is it effective for a teacher to have a Facebook page and kind of present their homework through a Facebook page? So maybe they'd make a post on Facebook, and it would say, reply here with your thoughts on some XYZ issue in society, and then all the people that are following that Facebook page would maybe reply. Another example of this, if you kind of want to look at this social issue a little bit, is a website called Edmodo, and it creates a social media class for the classroom. Anyways, that's kind of off the topic. Now, if we were going to write a synthesis essay on this, of course we have to now figure out what are we hypothesizing to happen from this. What are we expecting to find from this question? And you can do one of two things here. Your thesis, because that's the next step, after you of course come up with a topic, then you come up with a research question, and then you come up with a thesis. Your thesis has to answer the research question, because the thesis, after all, is the point of the paper. And if the point of the paper is to answer your research question, then you're essentially making an essay that answers your research question. That is exactly what the synthesis question, or excuse me, the synthesis essay does. Now, also, if you're following along in the book, what I'm going over at this point is found between pages 191 and really all the way over to 197. But primarily it's going to be right there on page 192 when it says questions that help you formulate and develop your synthesis views, because essentially your thesis is your view. So let's say that my view is that, let's say I follow the typical SOAR acronym. And so my subject, of course, is social media in the classroom. Let's put SESM in class, social media in class. My opinion, this is where I have my hypothesis. What do I think is going to be the issue here, or what do I think is going to be the outcome here? And really, before you develop your opinion, you should really do your research first in order to figure out, what is it that you believe. So my opinion, I'm going to say that it's effective as a supplement. Because you'll find, if you look at the research under these types of topics, that it's good to have technology in the classroom, but it's not good to have technology be the primary driving motivation behind the classroom. It's better to use it as a supplement. Have traditional lectures, like we're doing here, and then use technology as sort of a supplement, like we do with the Blackboard program. Now, the action here, what am I trying to do, or what am I trying to get done from the reader? And in this case, really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, persuade them at the most basic level. But what does that really look like? What do I want them to do? And so this might require me to figure out who my audience is, because if you don't know who your audience is, how can you figure out what you want them to do? So let's say that my audience is, and here, let's move this guy real quick. Maybe not. There we are. So the audience, then, I'm going to say that my audience are teachers. My audience is made up of teachers. And I'm trying to persuade them to supplement with technology. And so because that's what I'm trying to get them to do, I'm trying to get these teachers to supplement with technology. Really what that becomes is I'm synthesizing. So you should probably come up with a different word for that. So let's say that I am providing evidence. And then why am I providing evidence that supports technology supplements in the classroom? In order to improve student test scores. So there's one way to come up with your thesis, of course, the purpose of this essay. And again, you can keep this this initial starting for your thesis if you want, or you can try and make it flow a little better. But nonetheless, the purpose of this essay is to provide evidence that can help teachers improve test scores in their classroom. So I think everyone's pretty well had enough practice with writing theses in the last two essays, but nonetheless, this is still just kind of a review. The thing is that with a synthesis essay, you have another option. If you look on page, let's see here. Well, actually, if you look on page 198, where you're looking at Rosie Evans, her essay about boomerang kids, what are the causes of Generation Y's growing pains, you actually see that her thesis, and you can kind of scroll down on the page to the blue side mark that says states the thesis question. They actually make a thesis question, and so that becomes more applicable if you are, remember up here where I said you really need to figure out what your opinion, you need to do some research first before you can figure out what your opinion is. Well, let's say you want to go about it a different way. Let's say that you don't want to do research. You want to explore this topic in your paper so that readers kind of go along with you on this journey, so to speak. So you can create a question then. And so if you look at Rosie Evans on page 198 in the textbook, hers says, what are the causes of delayed adulthood trends we see within Generation Y, and how should society respond? So in that perspective, you can do one of two things. Of course, you can actually use your research question as your thesis, and then you go about writing your essay in the manner of you were basically exploring this question and providing information, and you're analyzing the topic, synthesizing the topic as an exploratory essay where you're more or less trying to cite all this information to lead the reader into figuring out, what is the answer to this question. Let's see. If you didn't want to do that, you could also reword the question or find out what is it that you really want to do. And you do that with creating a what if question. And it doesn't necessarily have to be what if. It could be, like as in the case of Rosie Evans, what are the causes? And so you could say, what benefits or issues arise when social media is embedded in the classroom. And so that's more or less a more specific version of what my research question was. My research question, of course, was, is social media effective means of preventing course material? Here, the question becomes, what benefits or issues arise when social media is embedded in the classroom? Basically saying, is social media effective? It's another way, way of rewording what you've already said in your research question. So there's multiple ways to write your thesis. Of course, you're welcome to follow the SOAR acronym, or if you prefer, you can either use your research question, or you can reword your question into a what-if situation. Now, once you've done that, if we scroll back up to the top and remember what it is we're actually talking about, now we need to start looking at what this would look like if it was an actual essay. So again, we start with the intro where we have our thesis. We do an analysis of the current literature review. We start synthesizing the main points, basically explaining what we've gleaned from the entire literature review, and then we pose a solution followed by a conclusion. So what that would look like, of course, the intro is then, we'll use this question, what benefits and if you wanted to use the other question, or excuse me, the other thesis, the purpose of this essay is to provide evidence that can help teachers improve test scores in the classroom. If you're more comfortable with that, you can also use that. This is the alternative. So either way, it really doesn't make much difference if you use a question or if you just use a typical thesis statement. The next section then becomes an analysis, or that literature review. Now there's many ways you can do a literature review. What I find to be the most easy, the easiest way to do this is to go in chronological order. If I'm looking at what benefits, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at research that's out there. I'm going to find essays that are out there that kind of show the history of using social media in the classroom, or in this case, maybe the history of social media. And so that might look like the history of social media, in the classroom, and then the effects of social media. In school. That's one option you have. If you don't like that idea, if you don't like the chronological order, you can also do a theme-based. And this really becomes more or less, not necessarily a compare and contrast, but more of a way of informing readers about the benefits and the downfalls. And so it would be more thematic, where you talk about benefits, you talk about downfalls, and all the while you're giving examples of what you're talking about that's cited from current research or whatever source it is you decide to use. That is one of the two easiest ways that I find, either the chronological or the thematic, to where you're just kind of providing basically a summary of what you've already gotten in your current essay. Kind of depends on how you organize your last essay, I suppose. But nonetheless, make sure that you don't just cut and paste your old essay into the new essay, because it really needs to be a summary. Not, you only have, I think, 4 to 5 pages. Let's see. Yeah, 4 to 5 pages. And so if you wrote 4 pages on your last essay and you just cut and paste that into this new one, then you're going to end up with a very long essay, and you have to make sure it's below that 5-page limit. So let's see. After we get this, the section of the analysis, then we move on to synthesize. Synthesizing the information. Basically, what is your interpretation of this? You just gave me all this information about the benefits, the downfalls, and if you didn't go that route, you just gave me the history, social media in the classroom, and then the effects. You just outlined all this information. Now I need to know, how do you take all of that information? Because you have all these sources. There's all these sources you just showed me about history, all these sources about the classroom, all these research sources about the effects. Or if you didn't go that route, you have all these research sources that do both of these. So you have all these sources. And what you're doing here is basically, out of all those sources, what are the common topics or themes? What are the common areas of interest? You're not going to have a whole lot of information here in the synthesis information section, most likely. I can't say for sure because your writing style may differ. But most of the time, your literature review is going to be setting the stage. It's going to be, 1 or 2 pages, and then the synthesizing information is going to be about a page, and then of course the proposal, the solution that you're suggesting, comes in the next section. But this isn't meant to be like the entire essay. This would really be 1, maybe 2 pages at tops. You might even be able to get it down to as low as maybe a paragraph, but maybe 2 paragraphs. But nonetheless, you're synthesizing the information. And really what we're talking about when we say synthesizing, basically putting all the information out there and crushing it all together, and then you're categorizing all the important stuff, all the common topics and themes, all the important topics and themes, all the areas of main interest. Now, the last thing that you have to remember is that section 3, the fourth section total, if you count the introduction, analysis, synthesis, and then after that you have your proposed solution. That proposed solution is what your solution to this social issue. Because remember, you're supposed to be outlining a problem, right? If you're outlining a problem, well, what do you suggest to be the solution? And try to stay away from things that are just, one side or the other. Rather than saying, abortion is bad because of all this stuff that I told you, focus on something new, something that not everyone tries to use as the core argument. Think about what it is that you're talking about. For instance, if you were to, let's say you were doing abortion, and one side says, no, it's murder, and the other side says, no, it's not. Whenever you start to synthesize all that information, murder might even actually be one of your common topics or your area of interest. Another area of interest might be life definition. What does it mean to be defining life? And so your proposed solution then might be, and I'm not saying this has to be your solution or it even has to be your opinion, but one of your solutions might then be 12-week abortions are okay, whereas less than, where's my Cortana? less than 12 weeks, or excuse me, I said that wrong. Less than 12 weeks are okay, greater than 12 weeks not. And the reason I say that is because some people say that the definition of life is that there are brainwaves. And if someone does no brainwaves, then they are not alive. So if a person dies, the way that they declare them dead is they have no brain activity. And so therefore they're not alive. Well, at 12 weeks is actually when the fetus starts to have brainwaves. And so that would be your viable solution. That is maybe a little bit different. It steps outside the box that is it murder or not? Well, I'm going to give you a life definition that says it's murder in one case, but not in the other. So that's just kind of one example. Let me erase all this stuff to get out of the way. Of coming up with kind of an alternative solution. And I guess that's really the best way to think about it, is think of it as an alternative. You're going to provide an analysis, just like you did last time. In your analysis section, you had to outline side 1 and side 2. You're still going to outline those, most likely, because you're going to talk about the benefits and the downfalls, and one will have, the side 1 will have benefits, for instance, and side 2 might have the downfalls or something like that. But what I want you to stay away from is having your solution be generic to one side or the other. So for instance, if it's abortion, I don't want you to just go, no, it's not murder, so abortion's okay. I want you to provide some sort of backing, some sort of support that says it's not murder, or if you say it is, You have to have some sort of alternative to tell me, why is this any different than Joe Schmo, who says it's murder just based on morals? Or if the big one is, a lot of the Catholic Church, they all say that the abortion is wrong. Just abortion is, what we'll say, immoral. And that's fine, but you can't just use that as your backing. You need to have some sort of alternative viewpoint. What is it that makes your view different than the traditional, it's immoral, or it's murder? What is it that makes your view a little bit different? So after you figure out what your view is and how you're a little bit different than, maybe most people, or how it's just not the traditional viewpoint, you're providing something new. You're providing a new solution that could maybe appease both sides. Maybe it's something that someone hasn't thought of. Maybe it's just a unique perspective. Either way, the last part then becomes the conclusion, where you're going to review the thesis. You're going to review the main points. And that's kind of a review of the analysis and the synthesis. And then you're going to review the solution. And then you're going to make a concluding statement. The one thing that I want to make sure I explain to you guys is that this section here, the proposed solution, it needs to be detailed. If you're going to tell us that we need to take a 5-step approach to solving abortion, like we need to have 5 steps. First, we need more funding from the government. Then we need more people to support the cause, and then we need all mothers to get better education. If you're going to have something like that, and no matter what you have, really, make sure you detail how we should achieve your solution. How would it be done if we were going to do it? What would society need to do to reach your solution? Okay, so those are the 5 sections of the synthesis essay, along with how to create the thesis. I know it's kind of a long video, but it should provide a little bit of elucidation, a little bit of clarity in what you've already read in Chapter 8 for this week. So of course, if you have any questions, be sure to address those in Blackboard here. I have let's see here, I'll show it to you. I have a discussion board that is actually up and running for this week alone, that is particular to questions that you have for this week, because I know that the synthesis essay can actually be kind of complex. And so, where is it here? The writing project 3. Oops, I just moved it. Writing project 3, asking questions. If I could highlight it, that would be great. There we are. So this section right here is use this discussion area to pose any questions that you may be having in regards to the synthesis writing. So if you have any questions, be sure to post them there. And other than that, I'm available on Skype, of course, texting and emailing. Just make sure that if you only contact me on Skype, send me a follow-up email to make sure that I'm receiving your messages, because sometimes they don't pop up on my phone for whatever reason, and I don't receive them until a couple days later when I just happen to check Skype for no apparent reason. So if you could, make sure you just send me an email as a follow-up to any messages that you send me elsewhere. Other than that, let's have a good week, and I look forward to reading your essays.